Let's go for the actual score. Europa natural law. Greetings, humanity, and welcome to Europa Natural Law. It's very hot in this room, and I can't really open the windows because the traffic would probably be too noisy. So I'm might be a bit slower witted than otherwise. Anyway, first things first, pulverize the like button, demolish it, end it, finish it, complete it. Hit it and quit it, etc. Do all that stuff, and then subscribe and like, share, all of that stuff. Okay, so subject for today is good faith communications, which covers a huge range, and I'm also going to pick up on some things that I talked about last week and then ended up dropping. But this is an open format show, hence I am posting the link now for you to come onto the show if you want to. Okay. So this, big subjects. I think they're great subjects. I wanted to kind of say, just to sort of restate that the reason I'm talking about that there is method in my madness, right? I'm not, like I did say last week, I'm not into gossip and that sort of thing. But I think valuable lessons can be learned by seeing what is directly in front of us, engaging with it, learning the actual lessons of our actual lives, which, for good and ill, are spread out on these kind of internet connections we have. So the natural law movement, the natural law community, whatever it is this diaspora that's very, very spread out. It's not really it's missing a huge chunk of what it is to be connected with other human beings, and that's kind of part of this sort of meditation, general kind of thought process that I've been going around, that I've been going through around communities such as a Telegram group, communities such as people doing a show, whatever it is, doing any kind of project, is like let's not waste energy, right? That's I guess what it is. It's like we can learn stuff here, we can make mistakes here, let's do what we can to sort of learn from mistakes and try and work towards right action as individuals. Right, we've got someone joining. Oh, 2 people joining. Amazing. Okay. Hey. This should work. We've got Chris Nelson, hello, and we've got these guys, Jeffrey and Ali. Backstage, cool.
Hello. How's it going, Nemo?
Yeah, good, thank you. Turn that down a bit.
Great. Great show last week.
Thank you. Hi, Chris.
Hey.
So I thought I could start with a little bit about, there's a couple of things I wanted to just kind of do, which is like housekeeping, I guess. Not exactly housekeeping. One is kind of setting the stage, which is this, I'll put this guy up, the thumbnail guy. because I wanted to sort of what I've been thinking about communication, because of the things that I'm hearing people say. I'm kind of trying to work out. I feel like there's basically a sort of hidden aspect to like what communication is. Like I'm not really used to the question, what is communication, or what is the framework of communication? And there's a kind of basic understanding, I guess, that's kind of built into, our kind of our way of understanding, like taxonomy, our way of framing everything. There are kind of assumptions sort of built into that, I think, which I'm kind of trying to like pull apart and see what they are. And this guy is kind of not sticking to the assumptions, basically. This is the kind of apophatic, this is a definition of bad communication, of bad faith communication. Because on the one hand, he's shouting into the receiver, so he's like broadcasting his message like relentlessly, and then, which I guess would be like the dark masculine kind of aspect. And then on the other hand, he's not listening to the receiver. The receiver's not even at his ear. So which I guess would be the dark feminine aspect of that. I don't know. That's how it seems to me. And what I feel I'm seeing is that people are kind of doing essentially this, but they're kind of doing it in these ways which are somehow socially acceptable. Have become kind of socially acceptable because we don't hold ourselves to this kind of basic standard as a collective. It is there in the background. It's like, oh, there is a thing called rational discussion or rational dialogue, but people actually like completely abuse that kind of understanding like all the time. So I wanted to kind of go back to it and kind of ask, well, what is this standard? Because I sort of generally approach communication, sort of with assuming good faith on the part of the other person. And there's certain kind of understandings like, okay, is there a claim here? There's just kind of like basic logical things like, what is that dispute? And what I find that people don't seem to be very interested in that, and they will kind of take very circuitous routes of basically ad homing you, rather than actually address the point and stick to the point of contention. So I'm kind of trying to sort of see what this framework is, because I think it's there. And there are principles kind of along with it. I think principles of like right action. So another aspect of this, which I put in the description, is about agreements, and which I've been sort of instigating a bit of a discussion about on the group. Like, what is an agreement? What does that entail in terms of a transfer of value between people? So, I mean, I won't sort of go on too much because it's great to have you guys on, but that's the direction I'm going in, because I'm just finding communication really frustrating, and it seems like my assumptions of like what I would consider like good faith communication are kind of not really, they're too high, and people aren't really doing that, and they do these other things which if you have if you're assuming good faith in it, let's say that there's this is actually really important stuff. It's not like it is actually about right and wrong, because if you, I think in genuine communication, you're entering into something, and the understanding is, or hopefully could be, that there's a point of contention, and you're going to like really find the truth of that, and you're both looking for that, and you don't want to waste the other person's energy and time, because you're both looking for the same thing. And the only thing that's keeping you there in this discussion is trying to find that resolution. So when someone does essentially this, you know, in some form or other, distracts from the actual point of contention and starts in some form, whether it's really overt like this, which, you know, I have experienced recently, and it's not good, you know. And then, or whether it's the more subtle forms, which is largely basically some kind of ad hominem, which is disguised, and probably not knowingly. Probably people are really trying to help and analyze you, you know, help you to do your shadow work when they go into great analysis about why you're motivated to do something. But actually what it amounts to often in the conversation is just a roundabout ad hominem, because it's not addressing the point. Right. So I will hand that over to whoever wants to jump in, and I'll get this guy out of the way because he's horrible.
So someone
can't hear you.
Can't hear me. Let me see.
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Right now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So being someone who often does formal debates online, this is a huge topic, because I feel like it's almost like the government and our handlers or whoever, the powers that be, don't want us resolving conflicts on our own, it seems like. And it almost seems finding people in good faith to discuss topics that are tough topics is very, 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 very hard to do. I started my YouTube practically to have tough discussions and debate topics that people aren't debating, and it is so hard to find people in good faith. I've done debates with farmers and stuff who in the beginning very much showed that they were in good faith, but then the moment the debate happened, everything went down the toilet. I mean, I feel like almost one of the main goals of my podcast is to get people to talk about tough subjects, and it's just it's pretty hard to do. It's pretty hard. Like I was saying earlier, like government wants us to rely on them to resolve conflicts. They want us to think that they're the authority that's that's going to be the end all moral judge, and it's just not true. And getting down more to the macro, like a lot what's been happening lately, one of the few contradictions I've seen of Mark Passio is him promoting petty tyranny and forced shadow work, and then telling people to block anyone that annoys them, basically. So what I've been dealing with a lot is a lot of these people that are like, oh, they're like, you're a troll and I'm going to block you. And they take themselves out of the equation, but only in their little world, only on their screen, which doesn't, I mean, I guess, yeah, the idea of blocking, oh, you're going to block this person, you're not going to have to deal with them anymore. But that's not necessarily true. And at least with me personally, it just pisses me off more and makes me get louder because that's what we're supposed to do to, tyranny. We're supposed to get loud about things. We're supposed to get loud about slavery and stuff like this. And if we aren't practicing these tools in our daily lives, you know, you're only half as good as your last day training. So it's like, you know, it's going to be tough to react in the correct way when something serious happens if you're not training this tool. And yeah, I think that's all for now.
I just brought up just a definition of good faith, just to be clear on what we're talking about. So it's now good, honest intentions, even if producing unfortunate results. And that definition really, that's a good one, because I think while maybe entering a conversation or engaging in a chat or engaging with someone, while all parties may have good intentions in the beginning, that production of unfortunate results, so whether it being someone talking about someone else who they're friends with, these social dynamics, this psychology comes up, and where, like I said, maybe all parties start out with good intentions, the unfortunate results may be people getting triggered or people hearing something they don't like. And again, I'm not just outward pointing. I mean, we all have to deal with that in communication, right? That's kind of the goal of us studying natural law and psychology, the trivium, all of that is to sort of train ourselves to stay in that good faith, because I think I see that happen a lot as well, to where, like I said, the parties entering in the conversation have good faith, perhaps, but then that sort of crumbles away. But yeah, so I like that definition. Wanted to share it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
I can say a few words related to what Jeffrey said. So, you know, is going off of what Passio has talked about, right? He's like, so he has a show, and people pay attention to it, and he's yelling, like, not exactly like that image, but he's like embodying that persona, you know, like communicating but yelling through it. So that can work and it can not work. And different types of people it can work for, and different types of people it won't work for. The people it won't work for will not listen to you. The people who will work for, it will be like a kick in the ass or lighting a fire under their ass to get them to move. And it's not simply the yelling, it's the message within the yelling that is going to be the motivator. It's not just you're a worthless piece of shit, with no context. It's because, well, you're not doing the things that are required in order to fulfill the goal that you say you want. So this is all about creating true freedom and the failure of achieving that goal. So within the context of that goal and the petty tyranny and the forced shadow work, as that's what Passio engaged in on his show, so people were paying attention to it. They tune into the show and they're like, oh, you're going to tune into me? Well, here, I'm going to tell you shit that you don't want to hear about yourself. So why you're not doing the great work, how you're failing, how that makes you in self-loathing and self-hate. You don't have enough self-care. And then he would just insult them and do ad hominems to try to, for those who can take it, to shake them out of their complacency and their calcified ego in order to get them to, well, I guess, face themselves and do something different. And like I said, that's not going to work for everybody. And it will work for some people. Like in the beginning, he wasn't as harsh, but his the harshness he had back in like 2010 to 2013 was very mild. But even that helped to, you know, light a fire under my ass, kick myself in the ass, and get started. But for some people, it's not going to work. And the people, the point, the difference is that, so what I'm getting at here is you can have people who are paying attention to you and people who are not paying attention to you. So people who are not paying attention to you, well, they're not going to be listening to what you say. And then if they tune in, you know, periodically and they hear it, and then they're going to tune out, and then they're not going to want to listen to you ever again, which has happened with Passio. And it can happen with Jeffrey. It can happen with anybody. Or they'll tune in and then they'll be like, oh, what's this? Oh, I don't want to hear it again. okay, I'm going to block you and unfriend you or whatever the deal may be. And it's happened to, can happen to anybody. I'm sure it's happened a lot to Pasio. But the thing is that if you're doing a show and people are going to pay attention to it, and then they're interested in it, well, then they can keep listening to it, and then they can, and if they don't like what you say, then they're going to be like, okay, well, I don't like what you say. And then if they feel personally affected by it, as many people have been when Pasio talks about them, not directly but in an impersonal sense, but it encompasses who they're currently being in his general characterization. Well, then they can be like, send him a nasty email, say, fuck you, you're an asshole or whatever, or unfriend him, or like never follow him again, or never watch anything, or maybe years later go back and then get it. But this is the aspect of the petty tyranny. It's not necessarily to be loud about the tyranny and the slavery just everywhere in public, because people aren't going to respond well to that. So this aspect of yelling creates stress and anxiety and discomfort in people, and people aren't going to appreciate that in a public setting. So you can't just do it everywhere. So when you have your own show, well, you can do it there. And the people who tune in, well, they're choosing to pay attention to that certain medium, and the content you deliver, well, they can choose to accept it or not accept it. And if they don't accept the way you're doing it, then they go somewhere else and they do something else. And then they can complain about it and do whatever and block you and unfriend you or whatever. And well, that's their choice, and that's what they wanted to do. So I just wanted to mention that. There's also this, yeah, like I mentioned, the yelling, and if you're going to insult people, that has a large backfire effect in terms of what you might be intending from them. So like that's happened to Pasio with many people, I'm sure, is that, but he's not targeting it for everyone who's going to tune in. He's trying to target the strong men and women, not the little boys and little girls that need spoon feeding, as he many times referred to it as. So his petty tyranny and forced shadow work is maybe going to plant seeds, and those that are more weak are going to turn away from it. But those who are ready and have a certain level of psychological maturity can maybe get angry about it, but then also reflect upon it and reevaluate themselves in contrast to that message that was provided that they didn't like, and see, well, is this true about me? And then they can reevaluate themselves and then do that shadow work. So it's not that the forced shadow work is going to be done just by listening to it, is you have to process those word symbols and the information coming in, and you have to integrate it, and you have to work with it. And the petty tyranny, well, that's just the yelling and the stuff. But it's about not trying to control people, but being a tyrant in terms of verbally aggressive way to, I guess, get them mad or bring up that emotional quality. Because in the fourth matrix, and it's something in psychology that people don't really pay attention to facts that much, or they don't care about what's true. They just care about how they feel about something. So again, with this petty tyranny aspect, is it can be beneficial for those who are ready to take that emotional charge and then really look into it to see how it affected them, because that's how you're going to do some of the shadow work, is how something affects you. Then you can process, like, okay, this is affecting me this way. Is it because what someone is saying is true, or is it because someone is saying something that is false and they're just an idiot? Or is it true and I'm having this negative reaction within me because what they're saying is true, but it's a negative about me that I didn't want to face in myself, or I still don't want to face in myself. So maybe they can have that psychological maturity to work through that contrast that is being brought to them between their current state of being and the potential they can strive towards, which is the truth being spoken. And for those who still view it as false and they don't want to face it within themselves, then they're not going to be doing the shadow work anyways. And I just wanted to mention that more in-depth aspect.
Adrian, I just wanted to respond real quickly to that, just to say that just to emphasize, I mean, you did say it, but it's like the aspect of choice in that communication. You choose I mean, I remember when I started to hear Mark really yelling and like, and going like, oh, that crazy feeling of like, oh, here's someone on the because you see so many talking heads, don't you? You know, and then like when someone's actually like pointing at you and saying, no, I mean you, motherfucker. You know, it's like, whoa, okay, right, yeah. Oh, I see. You know, and it's like it was for me, it was perfect. You know, as I sort of said last week, but and it is perfect. And I can't, you know, in many ways can barely fault him in that approach, because it's true and it lands. But you know, but it's the thing of choice. It's like if you're in a you know, a call and someone starts doing that out, you know, it's kind of like it's a different thing, you know. And yeah, you need to sort of recognize that difference, you know. It's like it's a huge difference, and this is what I'm talking about in good faith communication. It's like, well, what's the, I'm trying to sort of figure out for myself what are these kind of unwritten agreements that seem to be very related to right action and natural law. You know, like what you say, if you say you'll do something, will you do it? You know, these kinds of things. It's like there must be morality in that, written right into all of that stuff. It can obviously be a bit more complicated than directly inflicting harm or whatever. And then, of course, there's the question of, which I touched on last week, about, you know, coercion and deceit being sort of the only ways that I think that words can actually create harm directly. And actually, it was this other way that I thought is a potential, which is basically not letting the other person speak, like just creating a wall of noise so that there is no communication. It's not exactly using language, but it is another way that noise can be. This is a physical way of stop barring communication, and it's it's really horrible to be have that inflicted on you. Right. So, hey, Adrian, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm just trying to understand the concept here that we're talking about, good faith dialogue.
Yeah. Do you want me to have another
go? Yeah, sure.
Well, I think there's these assumptions that come with, like, they're almost built into the language of a rational dialogue between two people. There's a I don't know if it's cultural. I guess it is cultural. It's kind of somehow embedded in there that, you know, your word is good, for example, you know, or that your intention is to resolve the disagreement honestly, you know, like through honesty, to find the actual truth of the argument. And both parties kind of, when entering into a dialogue, I feel like, especially as kind of people who talk about natural law, like we should be really tuned into that, and we should be very clear about what we're saying, and then also very clear about when we're not doing that and we're basically wasting the other person's time and attention, because we're not actually doing, we're playing the game. So the thing about this kind of like, I think this sort of like, most people have inherited and kind of live more or less within these assumptions, but obviously psychopaths don't. They just pretend to. So like it's so there's a sort of like, it's a real mess. You know, we really need to be clear. No, I do have integrity. I am sincere. I do care about truth. You know, it's almost like we should start a conversation with that, you know, and like be like, right here. So now we proceed on that basis, because what I'm experiencing and have always experienced, like with just mainly like conversations on the internet, but it is elsewhere, is all these so many techniques, including just simple interruption during a conversation. You know, that's not respectful of the process that you're kind of claiming to be involved in, you know, to just cut someone's thought off. You know, obviously sometimes it happens by accident and all of that, but you know, that's just the most basic way of stopping someone from communicating effectively, and we're so used to it that it just it's just like really normal. That's obviously in spoken communication. Anyway, sorry, so that's what I'm kind of like interested in.
So
Yeah.
the best way I could explain it is, let's say you got two people who disagree over something. Both these people are doing shadow work and actually truly want to get to the truth. They get together, look at the evidence, and decide on which one seems more truthful or more a fact. That would be two people working in good faith together to find the truth. Then you take a different situation where you have one person who wants to know the truth and one person who has an agenda or who isn't doing shadow work and just has opinions they want to force on the situation and isn't open to actually learning what the other person has to say. That person is acting in bad faith. You know, in anarchy land, like if we didn't have a government, our reputation is kind of all we have. In a society where, you know, where the populace regulates the markets through voting with their dollar, basically, or voting with whatever currency they're using. You know, reputation means everything. So being someone who's you know, honest and open it has great value, and people in good faith these days, everybody thinks they know everything, and everybody online thinks they know everything, and everybody, you got contrarians that just disagree with everything, and you got all these people with these takes, and people are more interested in having a take than spreading the truth or knowing the truth. But yeah, yelling, you know, I'd call it strong nomenclature, you know. Yelling is something we have as a defense mechanism to keep safe. We get, while it may seem like anxiety when we hear someone yelling, it's more of an attention thing. Like, Chris, you know, you have a kid. Now that you have a kid, don't you notice children crying more? You know, it's like something that some hormones get loosened up when we have a kid, and like you're like, uh-oh, you know, it's like kind of an attention thing. But it's also, you know, it also can accentuate our communication because we can use this strong nomenclature in very important times to emphasize really important things. It's kind of like what emojis are now. You know, we just use little emojis online to emphasize things because we're not actually mostly face to face unless we're here in these groups, which I think are the most amazing thing in the world. These open panels, open live panels are the future. Pure transparency here. So yeah, so using strong, you know, Mark isn't just yelling. The guy in the picture that you put up, Nemo, I think that guy looks belligerent to me almost, you know, like where I see what Mark is doing, not at all like what's in that picture. Mark may do that belligerent to certain points. Very rarely he'll really yell or something, and really, like, just like I, you know, doing all my podcasts is very, very rare do I actually get upset and show it, but it's always at very pertinent times. So having that balance of, you know, not just screaming and yelling all the time, you know, nobody's going to understand when something, you know, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You know, if you're screaming and yelling all the time, there has to be balance to it, and using strong communication at times is very valuable as a communication tool. Yeah, people are attracted to yelling. People are attracted to conflict. People are attracted to drama. You know, my show's kind of proof of that. But you always have to have a balance. But there's definitely space for yelling and strong nomenclature, and it's not always belligerent. But it does take a certain level of discernment to see the difference between belligerence and righteous anger. And I'll just wrap that up there.
Yeah.
Adrian, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. What I think about that is, you know, we as enlightened beings, if you're truly enlightened, it's not always a thing for you to be perfect, you know, like when we're conversing with one another, it's like a scientific thing. If we're running the trivium and if we have these principles and things that we stand for, we're often gonna like bump heads when we're experimenting. It's just a part of the process. But if we're all on the same page, we can experiment and kind of bump heads productively. Does that make sense?
I don't think it's possible for everyone to be on the same page.
Well, I think maybe like by the same page, at least in my mind, on the same page with intention, right? So not necessarily on the same page with opinion, like you were saying, Adrian, like that's sort of like the experimenting, the butting of heads, the exchanging ideas in order to get to the truth. But the intention, I think, is what is key, and the part of the communication that we would call good faith. As long as the butting heads is backed by good intention and we're just experimenting and exchanging information and ideas and opinions with the objective of trying to get to the truth and not with the intention of trying to serve our ego, trying to ascend a social hierarchy and to sound cool, you know what I mean? Like there's all these things, whether it's conscious or unconscious. I think that's the real key there, is the intention. Yeah, being on the same page with intention.
So I can't tell. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. You gotta close that window, Nemo.
I know my eyes hurt for you.
Yeah. Yes, because I hear people saying kind of things about, you know, and I talked a bit last week about community and like my experience in real life communities and stuff. I think that people have a really optimistic view of where we're at. You know, the fact is we're not that good. We're not actually really ready for community. That's the reality. I think that's just the reality. Even online community, it's like, and I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying that, like, for the most part, it's kind of like, it's all kind of baby steps, and we're all just stepping on each other's trauma and getting confused and hopefully learning. But this like whatever it is, movement, community, whatever, is very young still. And like you know, kind of I wanted to emphasize, like, the reason I wanted to talk about this process of even talking about the group and whatever is because this is something that people we need something. I feel that I need to have some connection with people because there's no one around here that I really can talk to about this stuff. It's pretty minimal, and it feels hopeless. If it's easy to get blackpilled that way. So I think we do need to kind of reach out, but I think we also need to have a realistic expectation that, you know, we can't even smell each other. You know, it's like we're lacking like such basic aspects of what being in community is, you know.
Yeah.
And we sort of go, oh, we know each other, oh, we're friends, sort of thing. And you go through these kinds of processes with people as if it's a friendship, and really it's very minimal, and we're all messed up, and we're just going through normal things that happen in community, which is basically, it's a mess, and that's fine.
Yep. Yeah, in a community, community is big distraction, because people think it's a little bit more important than it is. Well, sure, great. You know, finding your people is always something you should be doing in life. But needing a community to achieve or align with natural law, or the community being extremely important to the spreading of morality, it's just not true. And what I've noticed, just like Nemo's been talking about all month, every community I've gotten in had the same problems. Everyone's egos clash, especially when you're a part of communities that are intellectual communities. It's even worse. Once you start a group, you have to start compromising your authenticity, because we're not all able to get on the same. I mean, we see it. We're seeing it. We've seen it all year with me, Nemo's show, and my show. We've seen that there's no way of getting everyone on the same path. We got, people. We got Thelemites running around in our circles, moral relativists, and everyone thinks it's great. But yeah, the community's not necessary. It takes a lot of shadow work to figure that out and to get to that place with yourself. And, to not just want to be friends with everyone and be accepted by everyone and just share this mediocre message that's been diluted because the communities aren't authentic individuals. Yeah.
It's okay if I add something. I think the idea of a community being a group of people who don't have any conflict is also sort of a misunderstanding. While of course, like, we all want to enjoy having friends and all agree, like, and having a good time and not having conflict, like, of course that's I think, Nemo, you touched on this on the last episode. That's sort of the main, whether it be goal or the main hurdle for a community to get over and get through. And what constitutes a community is a group of people who can they can go through conflict and can work through conflict. I was recently reading a book by M. Scott Peck. What is it? It's called The Different Drum: Community Making and Peace. And so he spoke about he'd run these seminars, right? And so whether it be for like people in like a corporate setting, it was like team building and community building. And so he wrote about observing this phenomena called the pseudo community. And he said it would happen over and over and over. And what's interesting thing is that he said that he observed it happening more often in groups of people who are like higher intellect, more intellectual, like in a corporate setting, like people who are working for tech companies or whatever, people who fancy themselves being of a little bit more intelligent. But this phenomena of the pseudo community would form quicker with these groups of people. So just to read an excerpt. So the pseudo community, this is a stage where people pretend to have a balanced and open friendship with one another and cover up their differences by acting as if the differences do not exist. Pretending differences don't exist and pseudo community can never directly lead to true community. So the goal is to maintain open communication and a commitment to celebrating diversity so people can spend as little time as possible in this pretend stage of community. So chaos. When pseudo community fails to work, the members start falling upon each other, giving vent to their mutual disagreements and differences. This is a period of chaos. It is a time when people in the community realize that differences cannot be simply ignored. Chaos looks counterproductive, but it is the first genuine step towards true community building. And so then there's a stage of emptiness. After this chaos comes emptiness. At this stage, the people learn to empty themselves of those ego-related factors that are preventing their entry into true community. Emptiness is a tough step because it involves the death of a part of the individual, the ego. But Peck argues this death paves the way for the birth of a new creature, the true community, which, having worked through emptiness, the people in the community are in complete empathy with one another. There's a great level of understanding. People are able to relate to each other's feelings. Discussions, even when heated, never get sour, and motives are not questioned. Now, the whole idea of understanding and embracing people for their differences, what the key part of that, again, is the good faith, is the intention. Because looking at it objectively, right, there's people, someone can have an opinion and it can be objectively wrong, and it can hurt their feelings when people speak up and say, hey, this is wrong. But the whole point, we can reach the true community. I say we, but a true community can be reached when there is the good faith factor, essentially. I mean, that's what I'm getting from that. But yeah, very interesting book. And
that's really like on the subject as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, thought so.
Very.
Yeah, it's the only part I would sort of question is where he talks about the death of the ego, because maybe you'd agree that I don't see that as a goal for myself.
Nope.
Yeah,
I would call it more of like control of the ego. Again, the shadow work, the understanding of the ego, seeing it, being able to sort of see when it's kind of out of control. But yeah, totally agree with you.
You definitely can't align yourself with natural law without ego. Not going to stick up for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, one way I would rephrase how most people view the term ego death is a de-identification with yourself. So I've termed it objective morality in some of my earlier work. Not objective morality, objective detachment. So you're going to detach from yourself and everything that comes in as information. You're trying to relate everything to you. And that's where people get into the problem where information is presented. It could be true, and then you could find it offensive even though it's true because it relates to you. That's because you're automatically associating it with you and your valuation of yourself. So you need to objectively detach from yourself and then view the information as information and not try to associate it with who you are currently and what you do and your behavior, because that's usually where people get the most offended, because they're currently doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or the information contrasts how their current state of being is, and then they get insulted and offended and they feel judged. And that relates to another saying that I came up with 10, 11 years ago is, you insult, offend, and judge yourself by your own actions. So someone can bring up the truth and just speak the truth. And because you're attached to falsity, because your current state of being is more aligned with falsity, there's an automatic contrast between what the person is saying and how you're reflecting it against yourself. So there's automatically a contradiction and a conflict, because you automatically view everything about you. You're like, I'm fine. I'm a good person. What I do is okay. Otherwise, well, I would not be doing it. I'd be doing something else. So people have these automatic false assumptions about themselves, and they're not able to engage in this objective detachment, as I refer to it, where they honestly evaluate, they separate from themselves temporarily in their self-view and their worldview, and they try to honestly, this good faith that we're talking about, honestly look at the information and then try to bring it in and see how it reflects against them. And then that's the impetus for change. That's the conflict is, well, is it true? And this is where cognitive dissonance also comes in, which I have a big chart on that process. So these emotional cues, anxiety, stress, anger, shame, guilt, etc. Well, when that comes in, well, that's these emotional cues that you can pay attention to or ignore, and that's where you need to pay attention to them and be mindful. This is what mindfulness is actually about. The true mindfulness is being mindful of your reaction to things. There's this thing of no one's in control of how you react. So someone could say things to you and insult you, but you choose how you respond. And you could get all angered and yell or throw things at them or whatever, and that's your emotional expression, is because your emotions are like taking the leadership role over your whole complex, the reptilian, limbic, emotional, mammalian versus neocortical, higher brain functions. And your emotions override higher brain functions, and you're choosing to react in an emotional way because that stimulus that came into you made you react, gave you negative emotions, and then you're choosing to use those emotions, or you're not choosing. It's an automatic process where those negative emotions act as motivators and drives for your behavior, and it's all being done in an automatic process. And that's where you need to create this gap between the stimulus coming in and the response that you create. Not an immediate stimulus coming in, information, whatever happens comes in, and you immediately respond. Take a gap, put a gap, separate them, take some time, be mindful and reflect upon it, and then choose how to best respond to that information coming in. That involves, maybe suspension of categorizing it as either true or false, and then you're going to take some time to evaluate it and see if it's true, and suspend a judgment about its veracity.
Fuck yeah. So if you get offended, that should be like a trigger for personal shadow work. Like if you get offended, you should immediately stop and be like, whoa, why am I feeling like this? And being like, okay, is this rooted in something that I actually believe in, or is this rooted in something that's been pushed on me? And that's waking up. That's that's shadow work, as Mark explains it. That's unlearning all the brainwashing. Our handlers have had bajillions of dollars and hundreds of years to get ahead of us in brainwashing us. So it takes a lot to unlearn that stuff. And getting offended is like the perfect, like if you're looking for like a practical like exercise to do shadow work, like if you ever get offended by anything, just stop, don't react. Your reaction should be to be like, question yourself. That's kind of what's been that's kind of what's missing, is the personal accountability. Everyone just thinks something and reacts in the laziest way, basically, not even checking in with themselves if that's actually what they actually believe. Our society is full of these people. They're all the voters, they're all the people that believe in the two-party paradigm, that all the people that believe we need a government and that we need to pay our taxes so that the government can do all the great stuff.
Sorry, Ali, were you going to speak?
Yeah, I just want to throw in, I think it's important to differentiate too, because I think especially in the natural law community, it's easy to sort of get mixed up. And it's important to differentiate between the righteous anger and controlling and observing ourselves, like Jeffrey was saying, when we get offended. And Chris, kind of think like what you were mentioning, like the viewing it's that objective detachment to where we're using our feelings and emotions that come up. They're tools, right? So whether it's, okay, this is happening, I'm seeing this injustice, this immoral behavior happening, and anger is rising, that can be used to inform us, hey, we need to speak out. Or I have this anger rising because someone said something that makes me really mad about, something about myself that I don't want to face. It's very important to differentiate between those two and just sort of better apply our emotions and use our emotions as tools, and sort of, because it's very easy to get, especially with emotions, to get kind of mixed up and labeling anger as being righteous, again, because we're all students of natural law. Many of us are very influenced by Mark Passio. It's easy to get caught up in emotion, basically, is what I'll say. And so it's important to be very discerning. That's the word I was looking for, discerning with those emotions that come up.
Yeah, especially in the heat of the moment, whenever you're faced with adversity.
That's what it means the most.
Yeah. and you're just trying, and you're just doing your best to understand things by running the trivium process and generating the quadrivium, and just, you know, spreading whatever knowledge you have come to actually know. I'm 22 years old. I'm young. I I need to listen, you know? I'm aware that a lot of people know a lot more than me, and I may have ideas of like techniques and like ways of conversing with people, but if they don't actually work when applied, then what does that say about my ideas?
Right. That's
Word.
interesting. Well, it's all about. I mean, but I think in this, you know, and hopefully we'll kind of go a bit more in this direction with the channel. But you know, I think the way it seems to me is that the natural law diaspora, whatever you want to call it, people is like, it's literally, it's just so young, and it's so fresh, and we sort of have this thing of, we have this model of Mark Passio, and I just think I'm kind of really keen for people to just become way more creative and diverse in the way that they express this stuff, you know, like from comedy to whatever, like all of the different ways. I just think that's got to happen. There's got to be a kind of a creative flowering, because at the moment it's kind of a bit like we're just kind of struggling out of the womb, and we're like not really we can't really stand up yet. That's how it feels like to me, as a expression of like truth into the world. It's like we've got a ways to go before it can be kind of recognized as a real thing. And obviously that's an individual thing. I'm really, like I said last week, this idea of a movement I'm kind of like really resistant to, because I just don't want to be part of it. Basically, I don't. When people start talking about a movement, it just brings in a whole other level of psychology, crowd psychology, that everyone is used to, you know, whether it's I'm trying to think of like whatever, the Barack Obama thing, you know, there's always hope, or I don't know, or Tony Blair, you know,
Hope and change.
Hopium.
Change, you know, go for change, you know, make America great, whatever it is. This is these kinds of things. Anyway, sorry, I'm totally rambling, but I did want to say something responding to Chris, what Chris was saying. If I can get back to it.
Remember,
it's about narcissism. So I think my understanding of narcissism, and this might be, I know it's not like way off, but it may be like disputed. It may be different kind of different interpretations of kind of what narcissism is. But this is one that I kind of understand. Sort of, if you want like pure expression or a textbook expression of narcissism, as I understand it, would be that it's someone whose sense of self is so kind of damaged and absent that they create a sense of self out of a kind of facade of behavior. So actually, people have quite a wrong idea about narcissists, that they're going to be like kind of like taking up space or whatever, but actually narcissists can be like very like helpful, for instance, you know, that because they define themselves through that behavior. So I'm someone who is helpful, that is me, you know. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there. I don't know how directly it related to what Chris was saying, but there's something there, you know. There is this kind of this idea that we've become a narcissistic world in some sense, and I think it's worth considering that, you know, whether on a personal level in our interactions or whatever, that
The dark triad.
yeah, that people are kind of operating without that there's kind of like some spiritual thing going on which is hollowing people out a bit, you know, in a general sense, and kind of so people are tending to lean more into, you know, how they look on Instagram, or how many likes they get, blah blah blah, or to take it to the extreme example. But it's not just that, it's kind of like this kind of the sense of the self. It's like this kind of disembodied ego, where the ego kind of identifies itself not here, not in the heart, not in the reality of the experience and the choice, but more in terms of what comes back from the world as a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I almost think that's like whether it's by design. I mean, just looking at social media, just like the hormones that pop off in our heads, just the like dopamine, everything that we receive, there's all, it's a stand-in, right? Like we're lacking community and real life connection. We're more online. So it's like that external input is sort of a stand-in for things that we should be generating with face-to-face community and or with ourselves, with what we are generating and putting out into the world, rather than just focusing on the feedback and what we're getting externally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about psychology. I think that's like the the eighth hermeneutic principle. If you can learn all this occult stuff, but if you don't, look at it from a psychological point of view and look at yourself internally, and because it all has to do with what's going on up here and inside of us, it really, like mentalism, psychology isn't just going to a psychologist like they say on TV.
We just need to be medicated properly. We just need to get the right pills, and we'll be fine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, naturopathy type things.
Well, yeah.
Well, that too.
that would be better. Not big pharma.
She was joking.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah. So just looking at some of my notes, relating back to what you were saying earlier, Ali. Society doesn't prepare us to invite and receive criticism.
Yeah.
Basically, so when we I think it's worth repeating that there is a sort of process, predictable kind of process, which obviously Scott Peck is like looking into in that book. There are these patterns of processes of how communities form, and they're recognizable, they're patterns. And so what's happened with the Telegram group, the European Natural Law kind of group, is this pattern in a way. It's like there's the first bit where everyone kind of comes in, and it's like, we're
party.
We're all cozy, and we all like each other, and there's no problems. And then a problem happens from somehow, and everyone throws the toys out of the pram. Is it or not? And that's a total exaggeration, because only a few people have done that. But I find it kind of a bit disappointing, because as I was saying last week, I mean, it's fine because it's just what it is. It's just a Telegram group. But like on a deeper level, I think, well, we do need to like build the tools of real community, and that what that is actually engaging in good faith dialogue. And that's not actually difficult. It just might require you to do some shadow work, but I mean, it's just words, and it's just saying the relevant thing. It doesn't have to be that painful, but it might be for you, and I can't really tell you how painful it is for you, because obviously we're all in a different place, and we don't know each other's triggers, we don't know each other's traumas, and all of that kind of stuff. But I just kind of like wanting to sort of notice those patterns and go, well, this is normal. It's absolutely normal for a community to have stuff come up, and it's And you know, I want to push back a little bit at some things that have been said to me, and say that, you know, I'm deliberately wanting a space where conversation happens, and that I don't think I should be really blamed for that, which I kind of have been a little bit. So, you know,
It's all your fault, Nemo. It's all your fault.
It's all my fault, and I barely did a thing, did anything. Anyway.
But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to add real quick, like it's tough, and I've been there too. Not like running my own group, but just it's like we should. I say we, but like this students of natural law, you'd think it would be easier to sort of form that space. And I think the part of the, like what I was saying, that example, Scott Peck's book, where that phenomena of the pseudo community forming up quicker than normal in among certain types of people, I think we're in that situation to where we all assume, no, we all should be friends and we all should have this space and it should be easy, but it's like we're not, we're all still human. We can't escape those patterns, right? And so it's just, it's, if anything, it's easier to sort of fall into that, being of the mind that, oh well, we should all just fall into the super easy and should just fall into a true community. Community should almost, I mean, just it should almost not be the like intention and the goal, right? Like you were saying, it should be the intention and goal should be first. Okay, having a space where we're focused on truth and objectivity and just discussion, even if it's, you know, not everyone's perfect, people are going to get triggered, and having that guise of being a community almost sort of like handicaps and slows down getting through that pattern, because it's like we're assuming that we're all good and better at this shit than we really are.
Yeah.
Right, and people have assumptions about community, you know, that it has a certain meaning to them and it should be done a certain way, and then they project that into a space which is just a room that I set up on Telegram, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Like you said last week about being the daddy of the group, that was that stuck out to me a lot. And then this week I got in a lot of trouble with some people in one of my groups because I'm not regulating who ends up on the show. And it's like, I've been doing this show for almost 2 years and it's always been open and it's always been live. And I don't, you know, I think I've only kicked maybe Justin Padini off my show twice after 2 hours of him being completely rude the whole time. You know, the openness of these communities is really where this stuff's gonna, you know, happen, because we're all here because we want to be here, you know, and it's like people want to control the group. They want it to be what they want it to be, and they get mad at you. And like you were saying, Nemo, people are yelling at you, you know, for what something someone was doing in the group, and you're like, what do you mean? Like, real world is, you can't just block people in the real world face to face. You know, if you're having, you know, a problem in the real world, this isn't, you know, like we aren't supposed to be able to just run away from problems like that and ignore and create this perfect little internet land where any criticism gets blocked away. And, you know, it's like these, like AI, you know, using AI as a psychologist. If you keep using it as a psychologist, it just starts learning your patterns and creates a perfect little bias against you, and you don't end up learning anything. And it's the same thing in a community on the micro. Like you just don't need it. And, you know, like we're finding obviously that finding our people is a lot harder than just starting a group and calling it something natural law and having a bunch of people show up. But there's all these people mad at me and you, Nemo, because we aren't kicking people off our shows when we're doing an open roundtable, and all these people know we've been doing open roundtables. And it's very confusing, because it seems like a lot of these people are screaming about the trivium all the time. And it's like, I'm confused, you know, like what's going on here to where you don't get these basic, you know, like this is a open forum. Therefore, you might get offended by something. And if you get offended by something, you should check in on about it. But yeah, I could keep going on that. But yeah, it's just the internet groups are just absolutely ridiculous and such a distraction. People could be spending this time doing far better things, making great work instead of squabbling over tiny differences, really. All my show, we've gone through so many people, and I look back at each person that doesn't hang out on my show anymore that got mad, and it was something ridiculously minuscule. You know, like I had one guy who was one of our best guys on the show leave because in one of the podcasts I was like, yeah, buying new cars every couple of years is definitely, you know, like goes against natural law and is against, you know, the free market and all kinds of stuff, and really is the cause for all kinds of chaos and loss of freedom all over the world. This idea that buying new cars, I deserve a new car all the time. It's definitely a statist idea. It's not anarchist. And because I said that, one of our best guys took great offense to it because he loves buying new cars all the time and he doesn't hang out on the show anymore, you know, and like it gets thrown in my face. Oh, Devin's not hanging out here. You must have did something wrong. And it's like, no, I gave him really good advice, you know, like, but he just didn't like it. So it's funny. It's always tiny things though. It's never some big thing. You know, and no one wants to talk about the base topic. People, you know, want to be like, oh, you're a dick. And it's like, okay, well, what did I say that made you think that I was a dick? They don't want to talk about that. They just want to, like you were saying earlier, just ad hom, never really talking about the actual, never getting to any conclusion on the actual conflict, just kind of trying to smother it with nonsense or running away and hiding, which, oh, that's like, it's just very cowardly way of dealing with things.
Well, I think it relates to as I was saying at the beginning, the guy screaming into the phone, and the other one is not, the receiver part is not near his ear. You know, he's like, he's given up on that. And so I think that would be the dark feminine aspect of whatever that communication thing is like shutting down and going. And of course, that's what like leaving a group kind of is. That it's like and you know what was strange that I noticed with the stuff recently on the group, you know, and this was kind of disappointing, is that people were very not communicative with me, really. It was like a very like unspoken thing that happened, is that like quite a lot of people who'd been around for quite a while like left. They didn't kind of say, it wasn't like, no one said, I'm going to leave if something doesn't change or whatever. There was very little like that. It was like, oh, you've just gone, you know. It was kind of strange. It was not like a proactive way of engaging with the group. It was so I feel like there's a kind of these patterns, because obviously you're saying it's conditioning, but it's all you know, deliberate conditioning. But then also there's these kind of social patterns which are almost seem inbuilt into the human character, you know, like gossip and kind of herd mentality of like being in or being out, and you know, whatever that thing is of like fucking a hanging, you know, like get the bastard, you know, like that's a real thing that's happened, obviously, that's kind of deep in our DNA of like fucking, you know, and I'm not say that in a negative way. I mean, it's a total tangent, but it's kind of like, I think historically, you know, humanity must have like strung up collectively like a lot of people, and I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it, because maybe they did. I just don't know. You know, I think it's what I mean is it's something that's in reality, you know, of like that there's some bad people, real bad people around, and so there is a real defense. There is a time that it is genuinely time to defend the tribe, you know, that does happen. And so these instincts are kind of in there, and they're quite subtle. They can kind of operate quite instinctively. for people, I think. And
Yeah,
so
people are.
I was just
Sorry.
going to say they're just acting, as I was suggesting last week, in more in an animalistic way than in considered it, more than in an aligned way.
Yeah, it's tapping into your adrenals over something someone said in a chat room. Like we're supposed to be tapping into our adrenals when getting chased by a lion out in the. I mean, we're not. This is actually totally fallacious, but we have adrenals to react from death and danger and stuff. And these days, because of the lives we live and what we've been born into, we get brainwashed since birth to get wound up over things we aren't needing to get wound up over, or we're supposed to be expressing ourselves in some way to get rid of that energy in us every once in a while, and it's never happening in our lives now. So we road rage, we flip out over people, we rage quit on communities that we actually want to be a part of, or chat rooms or whatever, it's pretty wild, but it's definitely like some weird innate stuff that's in us that isn't things aren't lining up correctly inside of us because of who knows how much conditioning or just
trauma.
Yeah,
trauma buttons. People are sensitive these days, and some people are actually grizzled veterans, and it's kind of weird because depending on you as a person, how much you worked on yourself, you can kind of maneuver in these situations in a way that can actually be productive, or you can give in to these things that just come up naturally, or when somebody presses you or says something offensive, you just, I don't know. And
it's like giving into impulses. It's like an impulse versus actually thinking.
Emotional reaction.
Yeah. And that shadow work material, that's
for sure.
Like y'all were saying, it when you get offended by things, that's a lead.
Yeah.
I wanted to add, we're talking about community. So I'm pretty sure the etymology of that is calm, together, and unity, which are, I guess, redundant, because if you're together, well, that's what unity is you're together. So anyways, they made that word together, unity, but it would be unity.
I like angry isolation. Just kidding.
I guess maybe it's to distinguish it from unity within yourself. You could be united in different ways. So that's united with other people as opposed to other types of unity. And we're talking about true community, and that's a hard thing to come by. It takes a lot of work because each individual has to have done the work, and unless they have, then you're not going to have that true community. You're not going to have that true unity. So I think it's we have to be realistic about goals of uniting with people, because we're talking about innate characteristics in people, and a lot of that comes from biases. So herd mentality, group conformity, groupthink. There's so many cognitive biases. The bandwagon effect, whatever's popular. There's so many that are interesting to look into, but we have this bias of we want to feel like we belong, that we're connected to other people, that other people like us, and there's nothing inherently wrong about that, but they can get you into trouble where your parents weren't there or whatever, they're working or they're neglectful, and then you join a gang, a violent gang, and then you feel like they're your brethren, they're your family, but they're not. It's all just the delusion that you create for yourself because of this need, this desire that you have at an innate level that you're not even aware of, so that you can't overcome it and override it with higher order thinking to recognize that programming, that drive that's driving you towards more negative pathways in your life. But when it comes to community and that desire, well, we have to recognize that it's a hard road to create that true community and that true unity. And you're only going to be able to do it with people who are not perfectly aligned with you, but who have more or less of the same internal work done and can reapply that in context of new situations coming about. And if they don't, and at first it seems good, but then as soon as you have a conflict, then that's where the cracks and the appearances show themselves as that's not the substance it was appearing to be. It's actually just an illusion. It's an appearance. It's a false appearance. Whereas you thought there was this substantive relationship, but as Passio mentions, a true relationship is based on a connection to truth. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how much are you aligned with truth and how much are they aligned with truth? How much are you aligned with moral truth, the most important kind of truth, and how much are they aligned with moral truth? So then we end up walking on different levels of alignment with moral truth, and you can only, maybe you discover that later in your relationship with the person that you're trying to form a relationship with and unite and cooperate in some task or endeavor in your lives together. So there's that aspect that we're trying to get to a true unity and a true community, but to get there, there's going to be compromise because we're all on different levels of this internal work and this self-knowledge. In our levels of self-knowledge, we're not going to all be the same. So we're not going to agree with everyone about everything. And some of the things can be trivial and some of them can be important things, such as things relating to morality. So if you're trying to work towards that, then there's going to be, you have to recognize that there's work that you're still going to probably have to do with yourself, or maybe in a certain situation with other people, it's always the other people because they haven't done the initial work that you've already done. So you're at a higher level of understanding and ability to reflect upon things and work through your shit. And so if you still want to go towards that goal with some people, then you're going to have to tolerate a certain level of shit and compromise at a certain level. Otherwise, then what you're expecting is that I'm at this level and I'm only going to unite with people at the same level as me. Well, how are you going to get other people at the same level of you if they aren't at the same level as you? So you have to compromise if you're trying to get them to your level, or else you're not going to interact with them at all. So there's always this level of compromise where it takes time for people to honestly face things. And that's what we've been talking a lot about. And then they can have an immediate reaction to something to accept it. So it could be they're accepting something false, that they're not paying attention, realizing that it's false, and they accept it as true, or they're rejecting something that is true and they think it's false, so then they're going to reject it. And the problem at the root of this, is this objective detachment and learning how to think. People don't know how to think. They don't know their biases. They don't know how they're immediately reacting to things and either accepting falsehood or rejecting truth. And then that forms how they're going to make decisions going forward. And then you have a conflict with them because, well, no, that's not true. And then they're going to say it's true. You're going to say, well, that is true. And they're going to say, no, it's not true. And this whole goal of good faith of, well, do you actually care about what's true? And it gets back to not knowing how to think, because most people don't know how to determine what is true and delineate between something that you can verify is true or verify it's false. And then in between, where there's possibilities of, well, this sounds like it's bullshit, but maybe it's true, or it sounds like it's true, but maybe it's bullshit, or in the middle is just, I don't know. And I don't have enough information to even have like maybe an intuitive inkling, or, you're just confused or something and you need more time to look into it. But most people are mixing up a belief in something being true with something being verified and known to be true. So then they get attached to it. As part of, I've identified like 4 main blockages for us to create a moral world, or create a true community or true unity. And the top one is the pleasure trap. People are attached to things that are more pleasurable and they avoid pain. So this deals in what we're talking about here, the shadow work, and especially with food and the veganism. People don't want to give other food a chance because they're like attached. Oh, the meat tastes too good, and the eggs this and whatever, and they just the pleasure trap, or they don't want to let go of sugar and eat healthier because it's just things that are pleasurable to their senses. So it could be your taste, or does it sound good? Does it feel good in your mind and your emotional state, your psychological state? Does it feel good that way? And if it doesn't feel good, then you reject it. This is tied to the pleasure trap. And underlying that is attachment. So you could be attached to the pleasure trap. You could be attached to other things. And underlying attachment, I have belief. So we're attached to so many beliefs and so many drives and desires that we don't want to let go. And these self-views and worldviews. So people become too attached and they believe in a bunch of nonsense. And they're driven by pleasure and avoiding pain. And the underlying problem is obviously consciousness. Consciousness itself is what makes all this possible. So there's great good and great evil. The capacity for great good and the capacity for great evil, most exemplified in human consciousness. We have the greatest capacity for either polarity, and animals are amoral in the middle, and they can't amplify the great degrees of good that we can, and they can't amplify the great degrees of evil and depravity that we can. So we have so much power on both sides of the spectrum, and that's where our responsibility comes from. And that's the underlying, the problem of evil. Well, there wouldn't be evil if there was no moral beings creating the evil. So the consciousness to belief and attachment and pleasure trap. And so as much as we want to have integrity within ourselves, and what we can have it within ourselves, we also want to have that integrity with other people, to that true connection, a true unity, and a true community. But that's, it's kind of a pipe dream. It's not a pipe dream because it's possible, but if you're expecting it right now and that's all you're going to accept, then you're not living in the reality that currently is and the work that needs to be done for people to change and evolve themselves. And you can be an assistant in that process. So you can have integrity with yourself, but other people won't have that level of integrity, and they're going to come at you with bullshit, and they're going to be attached to so many things and believe in so many things, and the work that they need to do on themselves is very big. And we're few and far between that have done a significant amount of work on ourselves in order to be able to engage in this good faith intention that even if we don't agree on something, as long as it's not morally divisive, then we can, perhaps continue to do whatever endeavor you're trying to do with someone in the real world. And then the online community, well, whatever, you can still interact with people. Even in real life, we have interactions with people all around us and all our commerce and everything. And those people are certainly not on the same moral level as us, and we still have interactions with them. So the unity and the true unity is a goal, just like creating true freedom, but it's going to take a lot of work to get there. And, anyone, even with our good intentions, our good faith intentions, and we care about truth and we want to engage in, these laborious semantical arguments, semantical misunderstandings where someone says something and someone interprets it differently. And then you have to get back to the semantics of where was that divergent point where the misunderstanding developed, to then correct the understanding so you can both be operating on the same page of these descriptors, these words and these definitions that we use to relate to reality, to try to convey and share meanings through our communications and dialogue. You gotta, sometimes it's happened to me before with someone in the past I used to talk to. We'd have deep talks, and then we're having this conflict, and then after an hour I'm like, wait, I think we have a semantic misunderstanding here. I think at some point I said a word and then you didn't understand it, so I think this is the word here. Let's go back and redefine that.
Wow.
And so they understood it a different way, and you were talking about it in one way, and then instead of walking on the same path and understanding, well, the road diverged, and then you're arguing about one thing and they're arguing about another thing, and you can't harmonize them because you're in two different conceptual realities talking about something. But then you have to go back to where that point of divergence was, and it could be, someone accepting falsity, or maybe you're wrong, and then they could reiterate it and demonstrate how it is true, and then, oh, you accepted something wrong. Or it could just be how words can be defined and interpreted depending on context in different ways, and they could interpret a word a different way. And so there's all these nuances of communication, and I could say something false even in this this good intention, trying to create a good relationship with someone, and the other person would be accurate in characterizing what I'm saying as false and that I'm wrong, and that could make them mad, this whole righteous anger thing. But the way they choose to respond to it could be in anger and yelling, or they could choose to recognize that I'm wrong and I don't realize it, and be more gentle with the person who's wrong and doesn't realize it. So there's all these pathways that you can engage in, and I'm not saying one is more right than the other, but it depends on what your goal is in that relationship with another person. Are you trying to create more connection and go forward from there? So if it's not something that's truly grave and deserving of a righteous, angry, emotional outburst, then maybe you can take that gap between the stimulus and the response and reflect upon what they said and how to best engage in them further to show them that what they're saying is wrong, to get back on that mutual understanding page and move forward in your understanding together. And so sometimes people just say, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal, I'll just drop it. And sometimes it could be a big deal, and it's worth reevaluating and getting back on that same page with someone. And I think those are the relationships we strive for, because they're going to be more harmonious, less conflicting, even though there are going to be conflicts. You can't remove them, but the methodology being used in order to resolve those conflicts can differ in terms of being more level-headed, even-keeled, whatever, and trying to get someone to understand something that you can see that they fail to understand, so you can get back on that same page, versus immediately reacting in a negative emotional way and attacking them for something that they don't even realize that they're wrong about. So there's different approaches based on what your goal is in that relationship with someone else.
Right. Sometimes they could be so delicate. You just gotta. You really gotta walk a fine line sometimes, especially with family members and people you care about.
Yeah, the bad faith actor sabotages good faith conversation out of fear of learning the truth. For like 10 years, I was a big fan of Marshall Rosenberg, the guy who coined the term nonviolent communication. And recently, Jana ESP, or I guess a couple years ago, she actually did a video about nonviolent communication. And this was kind of the turning point in me learning what New Age bullshit actually is. And nonviolent communication basically preaches that everyone's a victim. No one's acting on their own accord. We're all a victim of our environment. Just ignore conflict and think positive, and have really like happy communities with kumbaya bongos and stuff like that. And for years I pushed this shit, and it's really hard to discern the difference between New Age bullshit and the real shit, because these handlers have made it look like natural law, basically. And so it's really, it's almost like brainwashed. Oh, just be nice all the time, just be personable. Like that's a virtue, just being nice all the time. And even within this movement, there's a lot of that going on, because there's a hierarchical structure to it. Nemo, you were talking about this last week. once you made some moderators on your group, you were like, ugh, this feels weird. This feels like I'm like government, you know? It's strange to see truthers and apparent light occultists occulting information and blocking and hiding and covering up and sabotaging the conversations because they're scared to hear the truth.
But
do it.
It's like going back to like you were mentioning the walking the fine line, Adrian. Like it's like on one hand we have objectivity, and on one hand we have compassion. So it's like that's sort of like the line. So like with going back to the NVC thing, an important point kind of that Jana brought up is that a better way to go about nonviolent communication or trying to frame our communication to not offend people and to be compassionate towards people. We call it compassionate communication because nonviolent, implying that words can be violent because they hurt feelings, that's moral relativism. And I think that's the danger of all of this, all of our social interactions. It's like balancing out how do we stay objective, but how do we also be compassionate for those who we feel deserve compassion. But yeah, just a note about the NVC thing.
Yeah, it's like a balance of brain hemispheres almost. Like you know you're right, or maybe you're wrong and you're trying to understand things. And it's like a soft skill type thing too. You really gotta just study the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Adrian, your head seems like it's really in the right place. I'm
just experimenting, man.
Yeah, there's another young guy running around the natural law movement, comes to my show every once in a while and tells us how he knows everything.
Right.
So it's refreshing to see someone who's open.
Usually, I'll be honest. I mean, like, I have my moments where I'm just like thick-headed and I think I'm right, and I just have to test this idea in this moment right now just to see what happens. Just cause. But no, it is a valuable thing to have an open mind, and I know that having an open mind opens opportunities for you, and sayings like your mind is like a parachute and it only works if it's open, you know? I'm inspired by that kind of thing, so yeah.
Yeah, dude. When I was 22, I was a rock star in Hollywood being an utter psychopath.
Right. No, it's like I go crazy sometimes because I'm young. I gotta experiment. I gotta do things. Yeah. I can't
You're supposed to engage in high risk behavior when you're in your 20s. Sounds weird, but you're supposed to do that stuff and you're supposed to meet your shadow usually around in your 20s too. You're supposed to like really get into the worst that you could be, and during this age, because if you don't, you tend to do it later in life and it causes way more harm to the world. Basically, you're supposed to be a little shit when you're young. So don't try and totally be a goody two shoes, but you're supposed to be engaging in some shit right now, or else it kind of messes you up. Learning, meeting your shadow and then learning to control it. It means becoming a monster and then learning to control it. So don't get too far ahead of yourself.
At least understanding your capacity to be a monster, I would say. Not necessarily,
you don't have to go act it out, but
understanding it's within you, basically, I think is key.
Yes.
I think what drives me is just I have little ones looking up to me, and like people I care about.
Okay, yeah.
There was a point where I was like very soft. What Mark says,
Soft.
I was soft. Yeah, I was soft, man. I admit it, and I didn't want to be that way, and I'm experimenting with it, and I'm embracing that that yang kind of dark triad shadow self as much as possible now, so I can understand it.
Yeah. You gotta get rid of that new age grin.
It reminds me of there's a Grandmaster Flash tune, or Grandmaster Melly Mal or whatever, and it goes step, 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 step off because you know that you're soft and you want to get off or something. I can't remember exactly. If anyone remembers that one. It's quite a good tune actually. Anyway, so I just discovered a whole bunch of notes because I actually wrote loads in the description of this video. Obviously, we've gone for 140, so I was sort of like I'm kind of rounding it up. But yeah, the notes that I made is kind of a funny mix of things. This was in the description for the video, and I put fallibility, meaning understanding our own and the other's fallibility is kind of I don't know. I feel like that's part of good faith communication. Is like, well, I'm doing my best, and hopefully you're doing your best, and it's always kind of built in the assumption that I might have got some fundamental aspect of this wrong. And especially in this field, this area of natural law, it's like because there's so many questions. There's so many difficult questions, and it's not like we have to focus on the difficult questions and like, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin and all of that kind of thing, which I don't know if that means anything to anyone. But the idea being, that you can get lost in these kind of like moral conundrums or whatever, and you're not actually doing the great work. But yeah, so that was the thing about fallibility, is just being kind of aware of that. That's an inherent aspect of human beings. Kind of obvious. And this thing about untruths, about truth and and a claim of untruth, or a claim that an untruth has been spoken, is kind of like, it's quite a big claim, and it shouldn't just be thrown around. I would say this is another one of these kind of soft. These kind of weak arguments or distractions, it's like, well, if you're gonna make a claim that something's not true, then you kind of need to like explain why that is. You can't just kind of throw an accusation that another person is being deceitful. It's kind of just muddying the water. It doesn't actually help. You're not bringing light with that. You're actually bringing darkness, because now I don't know if you're telling the truth or if the other person was originally telling the truth. So now it's just a big mess. You're just muddying the waters. A claim like that in a discussion, in a good faith dialogue, it needs to be really clearly explained, and then so that's another kind of aspect. And then this is something I've just been banging away at on the group, is this thing about agreements, because I think this comes into good faith communication, and I'm just really curious about it. And it's just an ongoing kind of investigation, really, for me, is like what really is an agreement? What does it really mean, especially to someone who takes natural law seriously and takes morality seriously? And I kind of think we're very used to just throwing away agreements, not really taking them seriously, making them without really kind of understanding what we're doing. Actually, I think of anyone, we should be upping our game and being really clear with our words, really clear with our agreements, and sort of honouring agreements. That's something I wanted to kind of mention in this context. Another thing, sorry, I'll just run through these. The paradox of tolerance, because if you didn't know the paradox of tolerance, it's Popper is the guy that came up with it. And it's this idea, if you have freedom of speech in a society, then the the worse, what will happen is kind of like a law, apparently, you know, according to Popper, that what will happen is that the least tolerant group will rise to power, and then you will not have free speech anymore. But the paradox of this so-called paradox of tolerance is that you then become that person, because you then are going to be telling people that they can't speak, and that makes you the tyrant that you're trying to stop them from becoming. So this is, I mean, it kind of makes sense to me in the context of like some things that are being said about the group and whatever. So I just thought I'd kind of mention it, that the idea of, you know, that you can't tolerate certain things. You know, this word tolerate is being kind of thrown around, and it's a dangerous word to kind of to toy with. I think it really needs consideration about how it's applied and what it really means, and especially when it's used in a collective sense. You know, what can we tolerate? What can the group tolerate? Well, hold on, what is this group? Like, on what basis are we acting as a group? I'm an individual, you know. So like, there's again, it's kind of these mindsets, these kind of inherited social norms, which people kind of reenact without really a lot of consideration. So same thing with ad hominems, which I've talked about, but I just kind of want to hammer it home that, like, basically, if you're talking to me and you use an ad hominem, you're wasting my time, you know, and it's not okay. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. It's not good faith communication. And if I tell someone you're using an ad hominem, and then they come back with more ad hominems, then I just go, well, you don't even seem to know what this means. Then that's really like difficult for me, because what do I have to do? How far back in like rational dialogue do I have to go to start with it, you know? So please understand ad hominems. Ad hominem, and if you say, another thing that I've heard is this idea that you can start a conversation with an ad hominem, and that you can't. That's actually not, I don't think, you know, my conception of an ad hominem is it's a distraction from the point. That's what makes it an ad hominem. Because if someone comes up to me and says, I really don't like the way you do such and such thing, that's not an ad hominem. That's a claim, you know, or a position, something, you know, a point to be made or argued against or whatever. You know, if I then say to them, well, you would say that, you're always criticizing me. Now that's an ad hominem, right? Because it's not, I'm not talking about the criticism that they made. I'm attacking them for their character. So but that's not good faith, right? It might seem that I'm doing the same thing, but they actually came to me of their own volition because they cared enough that they wanted to convey something to me. So that is the beginning of the ideally good faith dialogue, is they are coming to me with this bit of information and a desire to convey it and that I can understand it. So in good faith, if I can say, I've considered this, you're wrong, and goodbye, that's one way. Or if I say, you would say that, or whatever, all these infinite ways that I can, you know, get into analyzing why they're saying it to me. And, oh, they should be, well, you're older than I am. Well, I can't believe you're saying this, or blah, blah, whatever it is. You know, like, there's all these ways that people seem to think that they're being clever or making a clever point, and actually it's just a long-winded ad hominem, i.e. they're not addressing the point you're making. They're just finding a roundabout way of attacking you as a person in order to so that they don't have to address the point. That's not good faith, and it's not acceptable. And in this community, if it is a community, if it is a movement, that's got to stop. We can't be doing that. It's literal kindergarten stuff, you know. So yeah, I really wanted to sort of bang on about ad hominems for a minute, because it's not good enough, you know. And I've got a couple more points.
I just wanted to clear up.
Go.
The ad hominem is where you're trying to invalidate someone's position by doing like a character assassination.
Yeah.
So if someone's saying, well, you're always criticizing me, I'm not sure, like in that particular case, if it's like they're trying to invalidate your argument just because you're criticizing them. I think they're just bringing up like, well, I don't like that you're always criticizing me. You're criticizing me again and again and again and again, and they don't like that. Versus, I think it's more of a non sequitur. So a non sequitur is like bringing up something else unrelated when you're talking about something like someone did something. And yes, it's a criticism, and it could be a valid criticism. And then they're like, well, I don't like that you're criticizing me again. And then and they go on this big like diatribe about it. And that's like, yeah, but it has nothing to do with the fact of what you're doing. That's that issue. Yes, you don't like that I'm criticizing. I get it. I get it that you don't like I'm criticizing you. But what you're doing is still what you did. So do you want to talk about it and deal with it and maybe change your behavior or not, you know?
Yeah, thank you for the clarity. Yeah. Sometimes it's weird how like I keep reading ad hominems, but then now I'm trying to think of one in that situation, and my mind's just like a blank.
Ad hominem is when the argument is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Basically, like if you start losing the argument and you're like, oh well, you're lame, you know, or like it's appealing to ridicule. Could also, what you're talking about could also be straw man. Well, they'll kind of start talking about something else that isn't what you're actually talking about. But yeah, non sequitur and straw man are what most people. But yeah, learning what those three fallacies, logical fallacies, are like. If you don't know that stuff, at least those three yet, and live by that, then like you don't know what the trivium is. That's for sure, because you definitely need to understand when your arguments aren't arguments and when they're just distractions. And Facebook, the internet is the world of fallacies. Like it is just the worst place in the world for trying to have an argument. And that's kind of, you know, that's why we make these communities, because we kind of want to start where, at least like get some other people that at least know the basics and try and start a community. But that doesn't, you know.
But there are, I've kind of noticed, I suppose it's been around for a long time, but there are, debate. There is a kind of a history of debate stuff going on YouTube. Obviously, it's all pretty shallow stuff.
Yeah.
For the most part. But the point being that there are like channels dedicated to sort of like
debate.
Explaining like why this is well argued, or what fallacies are and that kind of stuff. So there is some kind of, I think there's a bit of a return somewhere on the internet of people wanting to sort of get their heads around this stuff, because obviously, like it's like the classic thing of like a politician gets asked a question and they just start talking.
Yeah.
They're not answering the question. They're just saying what, and the guy asks the question again and they just repeat it, and people can see this. And even though weirdly, these tricks still work. Like even if I see that most blatant example of that, I'm still, something in my brain is still kind of going, well, he is speaking. Like, it's kind of weird. It's like, even though it's mad. I don't know. These tricks kind of work. Like I was saying, the most basic one of interrupting someone, because you don't like what they're saying. This is like absolutely basic, like relationship. It's like, teenage argument kind of stuff. Like, or like, it's just inbuilt into us. That's like, yeah, but blah, 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 I'm not going to let you finish because I got it, and this is kind of normal. So we've got a ways to go, I think, before we can really engage in good faith communication in a meaningful way.
in a true debate, once someone uses a fallacy, it needs to be called out, gone back over, and looked at again. But these days, people will just, oh, I was wrong. I'm just going to fling another thing at you. I'm just going to fling another thing at you and fling another fallacy at you and fling another fallacy. And it's like, no, you were wrong the first time. We need to talk about, like you lost your credibility the moment you did the ad hominem attack, and we need to address that. But they just want to bring more things up. And it's like, I don't know if it was like reality TV show in the 90s that ingrained this in us, or internet discussion groups, but it's definitely not taught in school. It's taught in school and taught in places where they just want everyone competing for money and not giving a shit about anything but that. Satanism, basically.
So yeah, my couple of other last notes was about community and authority, and how, like, just what I said, just to touch on it again about the authority thing, like it being appealed to as the authority of a group, the father or figure or whatever it is, the guy that can wield power in a group. It's just, there's just an irony of it, of like, well, what, you want me to be you want me to wield authority, but you want community.
It's like having an anarchist president.
It's not very anarchist. Yeah, exactly. So that's something that's come up for me this week. And then just the thing of humility before truth is what we really, that's the aim, right? That's the aim, I'd say, of good faith dialogue, is that we're kind of saying to the other person, yeah, I'm sincere. I want to know. I want to know what's real here. I'm not interested in trying to one up over you. I want to get to the bottom of this. And that takes humility.
Having a constructive kind of talk with another person is like the key for this good faith dialogue, is the idea that I have in my head. Because these petty things, if people are doing ad hominems and strawmans, that's kind of weak. That's weakness. Like, why would you need to go there? And if you're really trying to build something, why not just experiment, but like in an open kind of way?
Cool. Well, that's 2 hours. So I'm going to wrap it up there, I think. Has anyone got any last thoughts? Last comments?
Not really. Me and Allie shows this Sunday. If anybody wants to follow us. We have a show Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Yeah.
Have you put it in the comments? Can you put it in the comments?
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else for you guys, Chris, Adrian?
I thought it was cool just listening to y'all, just picking your minds.
Keep up the good work, Adrian.
Thanks.
I can mention that when you're talking about tolerance as a paradox, in reality, there are no paradoxes or contradictions. Paradoxes or contradictions are only descriptions given by humans who don't understand something properly. So their perception of something is that it's a paradox or a contradiction, but those don't exist in reality. So that person, I think one of the reasons they had the paradox was because one of the other sides you mentioned was the tolerance will lead to the least tolerant gaining control. But this is all in ignorance of how to apply tolerance within the framework of objective morality or natural law. Because if you're tolerant to things, then you're going to tolerate people to say whatever they want. They have the freedom on their own platform or whatever to speak their mind and say things, even if they're wrong. Then they're wrong, and it's up to other people to verify their claims, and they could accept them, and then they would believe in them, and they would have a belief, and it wouldn't be truth. But these are all individual responsibilities, and that those people, if we're taking in the context of objective morality, they would not tolerate. So it's not open tolerance for everything. You would not tolerate people advocating for immorality. You wouldn't tolerate their behavior, but in terms of free speech, which is what you were talking about, you wouldn't tolerate the advocation of immorality or people espousing beliefs of immorality, because those are the precursors for behavior, and those are advocations for reality to be that way. So when you believe in something and you're espousing it as truth, or you're advocating for it, then you're saying that you want more of that in reality, and that is a threat upon the well-being of other people to be, well, to not have that immorality come into effect. So you can talk about it as what is immoral, and that this is immoral, but to advocate for something that is immoral is immoral in itself, and that should not be tolerated. So either you converse and you have them, if they're someone in good faith and they want to get at the truth, then they'll admit they're wrong, and you explain it to them to see they're wrong. Otherwise, they are a threat, an existential threat to everyone else if they do not want to back away from their position and admit that advocating for immorality that they were doing was false and wrong, and that they no longer support that position. And one thing about NVC is, I learned about it 12 years ago, 2012 or something, 2010, I forget. And one thing that never rubbed me the right way was that, it's all about jumping through gymnastics, mental gymnastics, to try to convince people of things, rather than just, because I'm about the straight shooter and just saying things as they are. And NVC is this false characterization of needs, because pretty much none of the needs in NVC are actually needs. They are all desires. So, and then you're supposed to conform to people's desires in order to not create the conflict, so that you can have a non-conflicting communication with someone, so that you can get them to take in what you're trying to give them as information or convince them of something, as opposed to just abruptly or vitriolically, belligerently at times, just telling them something that is true. But that's not violence. But the guy just, it's all, you're a jackal. You got to be a giraffe instead of a jackal.
Yep.
And it's all nonsense, because the fundamental premise. I went to one with my partner. She wanted to get into it, and I was like, yeah, okay, it's bullshit, but I'll go one time. And then I was just explaining to her after in the car ride, what's wrong with it. And it's this the fundamental premises that they have is the whole structure of the material is based on this whole premise of needs, but none of them are actually needs, and they're desires. And this is what you care about. So you care about the things that you desire, and you want someone to not yell at you. You want someone to not tell you things that are going to be hurtful to you. Well, sometimes that's not the way it works with truth as love, as saying things that are true is an act of love in a universal sense, even though someone might not feel it at the time. But it's all this. Yeah, I forget the whole 2-hour thing, but I was just dissecting it. I'm like, they're going off of needs and all these needs, and what you have to do is you have to reevaluate what you desire and what you care about. And if you put truth at the forefront, then these other things that you view as needs, or you can put them secondarily, because they aren't what is most important to care about. You can care about them. Yes, you can care about people being kind to you and nice to you and telling you nice things and not being mean. But the most important thing you should put under that is to care for truth, and then the other cares that will motivate you. Because the whole way the course is structured is just fallacious. It's
There's no morality, no talk of morality either whatsoever.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But at the time, it seemed, because it's presented as this advanced form of communicating, like get the most bang out of your buck in your conversation. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of cool, but then it's like, oh, don't ever blame anyone for any of their actions. Don't, we're all a product of our environment. It's all intergenerational trauma, which is true, but you can't, it can't just be this kumbaya fest. Like, that's just not how it's imbalanced. It's completely imbalanced. But shout out to Jana for writing a rad lecture that, made me see the light.
That's interesting for me to hear, because I did go on a course at one point and read a book and all of that. This is years ago, and I just kind of like didn't resonate with it. And but it's really good to hear that it's so obvious. Like, of course, non-violent communication. Well, what do you mean by violent? What do you mean by violence? Because it's probably not what the word actually means. And it's like, oh yeah, obvious. Tommy, leaving the group without saying anything wasn't lost on meaning. Yeah, but Tommy, you left. You did kind of explain why you left, because you were, you wanted to concentrate on your own work, which is fine. I feel like you did, but and also we've chatted since then. Anyway, good to hear you, Tommy. Glad you're enjoying the show. Okay, so thanks everyone. Just before we go, I wanted to just give a quick shout out and plug to this event, which is on. I have to go here to do it. So this is a festival. It's the very first online Truth and Freedom Music Festival, inspiring creativity and care to right action. Is that coming up on the thing? Yeah. Because I need to scroll through it. So this is on Labor Day weekend, which is actually, it says September, but it's actually, I think, the end of August, last weekend of August. It's online, and an evolutionary online music festival. So obviously this is a thing that's close to my heart, the idea that you can convey something of the truth through music. Whether you really can or not, I just don't really know. It's something I've kind of tried to do it more. My songs have become more and more like lectures.
Are you performing at this event, Nemo?
I'm not doing this one, no. But
why not?
I don't know, but it's a few. There's a few guys. These are the people that are playing.
Theo's playing, huh?
There you go. And so anyway, that's coming up. So I thought I'd just give them that out. And they've got all this YouTube channels and stuff, and I think listening parties and stuff going on. Anyway, so that is that. Now, how do I get back to us? I'll just do that. If everyone's still there. Okay, so thanks everyone, and hopefully be back next Wednesday, because basically this is the day that kind of works for me now, because of the work I'm doing. Sunday was really hard, not good. It became
That's
not
good.
So I'm just going to stick with Wednesday for now. Whether I'm not totally committed to doing every Wednesday, I'll sort of see how it goes. If a topic seems the right thing to do, I'll just go for it.
Just do them when you want them. That's what I've been doing, and it's been a lot better instead of trying to do one every week.
Trying to be on a routine is not. No, who cares? No one's
exactly.
So, but we've had some people watching, and we're doing it. We're talking natural law.
Oh yeah.
So thanks everyone, and see you next time. Cheers.
Are you gonna play the intro song?
Oh yeah, let's go for
Natural law.
Europa.
Bow.
Natural.
Bow.
Okay, peace.